Thank you for joining us at Smart Energy Summit. Currently, 44% of U.S. internet households report they actively work to reduce energy consumption at home. This executive event brings insight from our research team, leaders from utilities, telecom and security companies, as well as manufacturing, software, retailers, and more, to talk about the future of energy for consumers at home. We survey 10,000 broadband households each quarter to provide the most reliable and accurate view of the market. Smart Energy Summit brings together industry leaders to learn more about how consumers can play an active role in energy savings, as well as the future of distributed energy resources, distribution and channels for energy management solutions, consumer adoption and trends of smart energy devices, increased interest in electric vehicles, grid modernization, and more. Join us to address these key questions regarding the smart energy industry. Thank you for joining us today at Smart Energy Summit.
If you miss a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to Watch Replays and click on the session that you want to view. Have you created your own event agenda in SwapCard? Visit the Agenda and Watch Replay tabs to add sessions that interest you to your own event. You can go back to My Event to revisit any bookmarked sessions, sponsors, and items. We want to make sure that you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors. You can interact with them by visiting the Booths in the Sponsor tab. You can also bookmark sponsors or add items to your event to view later. Sponsors have uploaded extra materials for attendees. Make sure to visit sponsors that interest you to chat with one of their team members or save documents for later. We have dedicated meeting slots set up for break times between sessions. Continue the discussion by requesting meetings from others in the SwapCard platform. Schedule a meeting with another attendee or a sponsor by visiting their page. The panelists and speakers will be addressing your questions live during the stream. During the stream, use the question tab to ask your questions early in the presentation. Go to the poll tab to answer polls that will be discussed during the live stream. If you need help navigating SwapCard, please reach out to our team by mentioning @Parks Associates in the chat box or by contacting one of our team members via our company page.
Hello, welcome to Smart Energy Summit 22. Today we're going to cover the state of residential energy management in the home. I'm really excited about our agenda today. I'm actually going to kick things off by sharing some research data on the state of residential energy management and then transition to a panel. My panel includes a bunch of industry leaders who will be talking about how their organizations are impacted by and driving the paradigm shift towards active consumer involvement and deeper understanding of energy in their homes. Next, the president of Parks Associates, Elizabeth Parks, will be speaking with the head of business development from LGE Energy Solutions. And finally, Dr. Jennifer Kent, our VP of Research, will host a panel with industry leaders who can speak to the important connection between energy providers, their programs, and smart thermostat adoption. But before we get started with all that fun stuff, I want to thank our sponsors, Schneider Electric, SmartThings, Rapid Response, Zen Ecosystems, and Particle. Thank you all for your support. And speaking of support, I want to thank also companies that work with us to drive the discourse and information sharing across our industry. Really appreciate these alliances we have with these great companies. And as we look to our calendar of SES events, I want to say just for a minute, it was great to see everyone in person a month ago at the Dallas Star. It was such a great venue. It was really perfect for our first big in-person event. And I really enjoyed all the conversations that we had before and after our sessions. That's like a nice bonus of having an in-person event. If we can make it happen, pandemic-wise and travel-wise. So we're looking forward to having more in-person events, one later this summer for Smart Home, and then also down the road. And even though this is a virtual event, we can still try and keep it a little bit interactive. I would encourage everyone to use the tabs down at the bottom of the screen there to answer the poll questions and post your own questions for the panelists and moderators so we can work them into the discussion. And while you're at it, working around SwapCard, please take a minute to sign up for sessions. and put these future dates that you're seeing on screen right now into your calendar. Because after we're done today, we have 3 more virtual events this year that cover hot topics in energy, including smart apartments, EVs, and solar. So please put all this stuff into your calendar and sign up in SwapCard so that you're ready and we know that you're coming. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm Chris White. I'm a senior analyst at Parks Associates. My team covers the smart home and also smart energy. So I'm going to be sharing some of our data today. Have a report recently that I'm going to be drawing from. I'll tell you a little bit about it. But first, let's get started by looking, and in case you don't know, Parks Associates surveys 10,000 internet households every quarter, and we dive deep into their perspectives and usage habits around connected devices and services. Today, I'm going to share some of our consumer data about energy, of course, that will be included in a recent report on residential energy management, and I'm hoping to give a good holistic view on how consumers are viewing the coming paradigm shift from a passive and sometimes disinterested to an actively engaged base of participants in the energy space. Topics included today will be energy consumption, data, demand response, renewables, and the opportunities that we've identified by looking at this consumer data that can help industry players drive more growth. And remember, if you want to know more about this type of analysis that we're doing and dive deeper into the data that we're discussing here today, please reach out to us to get these reports and just to talk to us. Now, overall, we see that people want to save energy and money, but they don't know how to find that information or to use it. So consumer attitudes are varied, as you see in this little graph here. But I wanted to highlight this one particular segment that is already motivated but need more information. Now, consumers in general, but these in particular, want better insights on energy usage from their bills and otherwise. And to answer that, we see a lot of players in the industry, including utilities, energy platform makers, and app makers, are partnering and working together to deliver more clear, accurate energy consumption information to their customers. And we see that connecting this data to the energy bill and cost, moving from kilowatt hours to dollars, can really help maximize impact. Now, another trend we see in the industry that aligns with this consumer interest is the spread of demand response programs by all the major energy providers. You see here that basically all the big ones across our country, and some of the more progressive ones as well, are driving these programs. So while consumers work to reduce energy consumption in their homes, the energy providers are working to control peaks and reduce the risk of blackouts, and also the marginal cost associated with generating and distributing more energy at those peak times. We see more and more utilities are offering demand response programs and using all sorts of different names and methods of marketing these things to their consumers in order to drive participation. And also, we note a common tool that they're all using, because we care about the smart home a lot here too. The common tool they're all using is the smart thermostat. So smart thermostat adoption and utilization is tied to the success of these programs. And that's actually going to be discussed later today in the other panel. Another thing tied to the success of these programs, obviously the way demand response works, is the willingness for consumers to allow the utility to control their homes, devices in their homes. Now, looking across the product categories, we see that this willingness is still far too low. Additionally, awareness is a major barrier. Our research actually indicates that 47% haven't heard of demand response programs, even when presented with descriptions and different brand names that we've seen in the space of, being offered by the bigger organizations. Or they actually understand what demand response is, but aren't sure, don't know if their provider actually offers it. However, the good news on the other side of this is that participants in demand response programs seem relatively happy. Most described little impact in their lives from DR events, and 3/4 actually said they barely noticed, or that the demand response events were less unpleasant than they expected. So this presents an opportunity if those users get the word out to the non-participants, the DR program participation could increase, because they can find out from their friends and family and neighbors that it's low impact and it's more action they can take to reduce their energy consumption, save on their costs. Now, speaking of taking action and making changes in how consumers work with utilities to power their homes, we see increasingly favorable sentiment towards alternatives of energy production and generation, including half of consumers favoring grid independence, renewable power, and even 1/3 who are willing to pay more for this type of power. So there are promising opportunities for energy providers to bring solar and storage solutions at a community or utility scale. As far as at-home devices go, we see lack of familiarity is still a major barrier. Generators are doing okay because consumers were really motivated to learn about generator options in this recent couple years after a period where climate events and natural disasters caused a number of widespread and highly publicized blackouts. But these other categories still need a boost. Now, the one where I think the boost is coming and where we see in the data the purchase intent is pointing to that as well is electric vehicles. Now, we're showing the purchase intention here to 60% is actually just for non-owners. If we mix in existing EV owners, that actually goes up to 20%. It's a really small but enthusiastic group that owns EVs today, and a lot of them are looking to add a second or to upgrade. So this overall is important because the growth of EVs will change how consumers think about energy. It's going to drive the growth of home charging equipment, which will in turn change the way consumers use energy at home. Specifically, it's going to increase it. It's going to take a lot of power for people to charge their cars at home. And that's going to mean that essentially there's going to be a greater fleet of rolling giant batteries just around available everywhere at people's homes to tie into the grid either locally or at kind of a larger scale. So managing all these things is part of the paradigm shift we're talking about. The increase in understanding and engagement in power consumption and use at home, and also like learning about the tools and acquiring more of these tools is exactly what we're kind of focused on here. So we're going to look into this data a bit more in a minute regarding to EVs, but I also want to point out that PV solar outlook is also favorable here. It's trending up. I'm showing that 12% here, and I want to dive into that topic briefly too. So in addition to the familiarity in general as kind of a barrier, the other big barrier to solar growth is perceptions of cost. So we looked at it by income because we kind of hypothesized that households with higher income should be more tolerant of the upfront costs, and also the ability, they have the ability to be more patient with investments because they have more disposable income. But the investment profile of solar is still not seen by very attractive, as very attractive by many households, as you see here. The people with higher incomes are still not that interested. This is a big challenge facing home solar, and the responses by the industry to this major topic in terms of how to finance, how to overcome the costs, and how to message around value is something we're going to be focused on later this year in an industry report and monitoring as well. Now, going back to EVs and talking about costs again, costs are a barrier in EVs too, though we're finally seeing high purchase intent. And the consumer base is kind of coming around on the idea that EVs are actually better for the environment than ICEs. And this should help the value proposition for EV makers and dealers when shoppers are comparing a particular car with a conventional engine to an electric vehicle. Now, the adoption stalled in 2020 and has really been fluctuating a bit in 2021. But we see that the purchase intent has risen, and really this adoption could be essentially blocked by the lack of availability of electric vehicles, including the delayed launches of new entrants like Lucid, Fisker, and Rivian, and then also the delayed or inhibited, reduced in size rollout of big legacy automakers who are hoping to put out more of their kind of marquee flagship electrified vehicles to promote their electrified fleet that's coming down the road. We're going to be covering EVs in the future, again, in another report that's coming middle of this year, later in the year, and at a future virtual event that I hope you put on your calendar when I was showing that agenda earlier. So we'll obviously be following all these developments, but it's going to be very important to the home energy space in general. So in conclusion, change is coming, higher costs of energy are coming, and increased usage is coming from electric vehicles and other devices. We're also seeing climate change issues and grid resilience issues kind of pushing people towards storage and energy generation at home. And as all these things are happening, the consumers are getting more engaged. They want to save energy and save money, but they need to learn how. It's familiarity and education that's really kind of lacking. And so the way we're going to be talking a lot about to our panelists here about how that word can get out, and then sort of secondarily, how can costs come down for some of these devices that more people can be involved and not just the wealthiest. So I'm going to transition to my panel here. We can work on bringing in my guests. So I'm very pleased to welcome Jane Hange, the EVP of Solar, or the EVP and Chief Operating Officer at ADT Solar, Jeff Martin, the President and Co-founder of VIP HomeLink, Ann Arquette Niederberger, SVP of Market Development at Energy, Akash Saw, the Chief Procurement Officer at Brinks Home, Paul Weisner, the VP of Product and Customer Success at Powerly, and I'm going to be introducing them kind of one by one and giving them a chance to say hi. So Jamie, you're first on the list.
Great. Thanks, Chris. It's really an honor to be part of this panel and on such an important topic as smart energy. And thanks really to you and the Parks and Associates team for the work and insights that you provide to the industry. It's really important. I recently transitioned into the role of Chief Operating Officer for ADT Solar. In December last year, we completed our acquisition of SunPro, one of the largest and fastest growing residential solar providers. So many of you know of ADT, but maybe don't recognize the fact that now ADT has a division called ADT Solar. We have over 5,000 employees that now market, sell, design, and install and service residential solar. Really, ADT's entrance into the solar market is due to our strong belief that consumers are looking for safe, smart, and sustainable solutions for their homes and lives, and they really want a brand that they know and trust that's going to be here for the long haul. So thanks for inviting us to the panel.
Thank you, Jamie, for being here. I'm excited to hear your takes on some of these questions I have queued up here. All right, next, Jeff from VIP HomeLink. Hello, Jeff.
Good afternoon, Chris. Thank you very much. And as Jamie said, thank you for having me on this panel. And thanks to all my fellow panelists for joining. Great to be here. Very important conversation. Obviously, I bring a sort of a different dimension to this conversation from VIP HomeLink. VIP HomeLink is a digital home management solution that my partner Alfred Bentley and I founded back in 2018, really with the idea at the time of leveraging mobile technology, big data, behavioral science, and AI to help homeowners better manage, organize, and maintain their home. Our mission really is to help people simplify home ownership overall. And a big part of what we do is this focus on maintenance, improving people's lives and their safety. But along with maintenance comes a lot around energy efficiency. And I think my vantage point today is really twofold. It's really bringing the homeowner's perspective into this discussion, which I look forward to doing, as well as describing tools and methodologies and approaches to really engaging with homeowners, which I think is a big part of the education process that Chris outlined earlier. And our solution, we believe does that in a pretty effective way. So look forward to this discussion today. And with that, I'll pass the baton. Thank you.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to take Jeff's baton and pass that on over to Anne from NRV. Hello, Anne. How are you? Thanks for joining.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. And yeah, it's great to be here with all the other panelists. Also want to thank you personally, and as well as the event sponsors and the rest of the Parks Associates team for making this panel possible. NRV's been around for a little over a decade. Our focus has always been on helping people make better energy-related buying decisions when it comes to energy-using products in the home. And our scope spans today over 40 categories, everything from appliances to EVs and water heaters. So anything that a residential, an individual person would buy at retail, that's our scope of focus. And we do that by eliminating barriers and providing shoppers with an online marketplace experience that's very different than what you're familiar from Amazon, for example. Our platform makes energy efficiency visible with an integrated choice engine technology that features our 0 to 100 energy efficiency score, the NRV score. And this makes the market transparent for people so they can actually choose efficient. And as you said, there is a big gap between what people want to do and what they're actually able to do. And really, that's our focus. The second thing our platform does is it makes signing up for demand response programs at the time of a product purchase a no-brainer, basically. And we're seeing pre-enrollment rates in DR programs above 95%. And I know you're going to talk about that a lot in the next session. And the third thing our platform does is it puts energy efficient purchases within reach for what I would call traditionally underserved or hard to reach segments of the population, including low and moderate income, people with low credit scores who don't have access to capital, and as well as renters. They've been a traditionally hard to reach segment. And we do that by providing integrated eco-financing as part of the online shopping process. And so as I was, thinking about the introductory remarks and the theme of this panel, I think the paradigm shift that's needed to unleash the full power of individual energy decision makers is to design solutions with the end user in mind. I know it sounds very basic, but that hasn't been the hallmark of the utility sector historically. And the industry is really moving now towards user-centered design. I think we already heard that in the 2 intros so far. So I'm really looking forward to sharing and hearing more about that from other panelists today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, for touching on so many good topics there and for being here. Okay, next we have Akash Saw from Brinks Home. Hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you, Chris. And like everyone said, thank you, Chris, and the Park Associates team for putting this together. It's it's great to be here with the rest of the panel, participants as well as the attendees, and looking forward to the insights that everyone shares. I'll say a couple of things, right? Number one, I'm a self-described behavioral economics consumer behavior aficionado, so I'm really looking forward to how the paradigm shift helps consumers adopt energy efficient devices. So I'm really looking forward to that. And recently, as part of Brinks Home, part of the other things I do is manage leading product partnerships. And we recently announced a partnership with Sunnova in November or December of last year, so that we can actually leverage our partnership with Sunnova to offer more energy efficient devices and products to the consumer and help save the planet while we're at it. So thank you so much, Chris and team, for setting it up. Looking forward to an engaging conversation.
All right, Paul from Powerly, you're next. Thanks for joining the panel.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here today. I appreciate the time. As Chris mentioned, my name is Paul Wesner. I'm VP of Product and Customer Success at Powerly. And Powerly is all about helping accelerate the transition to a clean energy future. And so we go about doing that working with utility partners. We have a comprehensive home energy management platform that enables people to proactively control their energy waste and carbon footprint, and at the same time unlocking new insights into the home, including every device and appliance within it. And so, with the combination of the access to, high resolution energy data, plus a variety of different tools to better engage and explain information to customers, we help customers better take control of that energy, understand how the behaviors and actions happening within their home impact their energy consumption and ultimately their carbon footprint, and then find ways that they can better improve and optimize that.
Great. Thanks everyone for being here. It's a really interesting panel in terms of the mix of organizations you guys represent and perspectives. So I'm excited for the discussion here. So I want to kind of kick off the conversation with something that, kind of a theme of what I was sharing earlier. Research indicates people are interested in reducing energy consumption, but they don't know how. So Anne, you touched on this a little bit earlier. So I want to kind of ask you to kind of reiterate and go a little deeper here. What are the best ways that we can be increasing familiarity and education around kind of energy devices and also energy programs and energy efficiency in general?
Yes, thanks. I think for this discussion, we need to distinguish between what it takes to nudge people towards better purchases in the course of natural replacement cycles, like when a refrigerator breaks, and they know they have to buy it and replace it, versus when we want them to buy or do something that they might not need to do. I think those are two completely different contexts. And so
interesting.
I will focus first on when somebody has already decided to make a purchase for whatever reason, whether it's remodel or something breaks. The thing is, we have to make it really quick and easy for them to buy clean, efficient products, not interrupt their shopping journey with what I would call educational public service announcements. Like any friction that you put in there is going to discourage them from actually following through on an efficient purchase. So I think we need to think about this very differently. The goal is really to make an efficient choice quick and simple, quicker and simpler than otherwise. Not to educate. I mean, the goal is not to educate in this setting. It's to facilitate a better purchase. And so we have to address pain points and complexity. And this is where our focus on, and I'm sure, you know, Jeff and others are aligned with this kind of thinking. This is where barrier removal and behavioral science really come in. Also, Akash was mentioning that. First of all, people need a way to identify the best products so they can actually choose them and buy them. And I showed the example of our Energy Score. That's one effective tool to do that. That helps them be able to pinpoint what they might want to buy. And then there are a range of other cognitive and psychological barriers that can get in the way of good choices as well. And we can't go into detail here, maybe some questions at the end, but we address that through the design of our site and also how we market to people. We also know that people decide differently based on whether they're in an emergency replacement context or a planned context. They make decisions with different parts of their brain. And so we cater to that through the design of our site. And then the third thing is we obviously make good purchases affordable. With our eco-financing loan product, people are able to buy $1,000 appliance, for example, with small monthly payments under $25. So we address that barrier as well. And I think, so we know that strategy of empowering the consumer, removing barriers, letting them do what they really want to do actually works. I have data from evaluations and such that we could share later. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, you mentioned about like who can help, you know, how do we make this happen? And it's clear for me that it takes a village to do this. At Energy, we have an efficient shopping ecosystem of partners that we've pulled together to create this online experience. And that includes us as the merchant. It also includes retailers like Best Buy, contractors like Water Heater Warehouse. There are fulfillment partners in the marketplace. We also work with lending partners to offer eco-financing, and in some cases also state green banks. And we also work with OEMs and DERMS providers to pre-enroll folks in demand response. And then also we work with utilities or state energy offices or other entities who want to help their constituents save energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's this whole efficient shopping ecosystem working in concert, which is made possible because of digitization and the shift to online shopping.
All right, very good. That's a good analogy, the village. Jeff, I'm wondering, what about your part of the village, the sort of platform software, I guess, house in the village or whatever? What is your perspective on this?
Funny, I took one note during Ann's little speech there, and it was village as well. I thought that was a great analogy too, Ann, so well done there. I also like how you delineate between the purchase decision and the overall building awareness and influencing overall behavior. I think that's very important. And our focus at VIP HomeLink as a platform for homeowners is really focused on influencing these behaviors. Providing the tools, the education, the content to really help homeowners be prepared for these types of events in their life. When that hot water heater breaks, what should I do? I already know a little bit about that process from my interactions with the content on VIP HomeLink, so I'm better prepared. So I think a lot of it is really influencing behaviors through a variety of channels. And one of our sort of core principles is this multi-channel approach in meeting homeowners, in our case, or meeting members where they are. So I think the education and the awareness building, again, to your point, really needs to be very much multimodal. I think there's a lot of players in this conversation. I think trust is incredibly important here. Whether that's, a person's ability to just Google something for an answer, do they actually trust what they're seeing online? Is it coming from a credible source? And which constituents in this process actually have a level of trust today? I think there's general suspicion around government programs across the country. I think that's just a reality and something that needs to be worked through. I will observe that I believe utilities actually have a very high level of trust with their constituents is my personal impression. We do a lot of work with insurance carriers where there's a little bit more perhaps of a skepticism around that relationship. So I think that's an important concept here that utilities in particular can leverage to the benefit of this conversation. I think there's also a lot of resources out there that are simply undiscovered. I took the liberty of having an energy audit, which was sponsored by my local utility, which I found to be pretty interesting and helpful. It was a nice walkthrough of the home. I think there's those types of resources that people just aren't aware of. And there's a lot of different dimensions to this as well. I think the knowledge that we can convey around this discussion broadly, and we do take a very holistic approach to efficiency at the IPO Link, where, as I said, we focus a lot on home maintenance, and that home maintenance really bleeds over into a lot of efficiency, changing HVAC filters and weather stripping around windows and insulation in the attic, but very sort of broad view of efficiency here, rather than at a slightly more micro level around the devices. I think the devices, we love what we're seeing in terms of devices coming online and the awareness building around that. I think those providers are doing a great job illuminating these discussions. I think there's a lot of other education that can go along with that really focuses on behaviors. And that's really the study I'd love to see, is just, the contribution of better behavior versus the contribution of better products and devices. And it's the combination of those two, I think, that really create the full solution. So, I'll pause there. There's a lot to talk about in these different areas, so I'll just pause right there. Thank you.
Yeah, so speaking of different devices, Jamie, you're kind of representing, because your background in security and also the kind of ties to ADT, you're representing a lot of different devices and also solar. So can you speak to this kind of the purchase stage, the education stage of the journey that our, I guess, villagers are on?
Yeah, I would say that I do think that service providers do carry a burden as we think about educating consumers. Quite frankly, we have the dollars for advertising, and I think getting the information out there, getting people interested, understanding how that they can apply energy efficiency in a way that makes their life convenient and comfortable and easy. Also, we have the reps and the technicians that are in the homes that are talking to consumers every day. So I think there's a need, particularly in the solar space, to ensure that we have clear, ethical, and well-informed information that's provided as part of that sales process. Quite frankly, for solar, we also have to focus on energy efficiency. It's not just about the biggest solar system, which I think sometimes there has been a reputation in the solar space for that. One of the things that we do is we have an Energy Pro, which is a service that we provide free as part of our solar process that actually reduces energy consumption between 10 and 15%. And I think that's part of that education process that we're talking about. That's part of the buying, purchase, the behavior changes, things like that we can bring to bear in educating and in changing people's patterns and behavior. And I think it is meeting, Anne and Jeff said, really great things about it's the behavioral aspect and meeting them where they're at, but educating in part of that process about things they can do. Because I think your research says people want to do things, but they often don't know what they can do.
Yeah, and there's the next step kind of in terms of education is, what can people do once they have their devices energy efficient or not, and their home management devices? It's, how can I monitor things month over month in terms of understanding my bill, understanding how the different devices that I have are contributing or kind of drawing on my overall power consumption. So, Paul, I thought maybe you'd be a good person to talk a little bit about how we can kind of better communicate, or what are best practices around communicating energy data to the consumers so that they can understand it and kind of keep the good momentum going.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, as, Jeff mentioned, there's a high amount of trust with utilities out there today. Generally speaking, consumers have, trust in their utility, their energy provider, that, what they're doing is what is, right for them. They're not trying to, price gouge them or anything like that. But what utilities, generally speaking, haven't been as good at is being more advanced in getting information to consumers in a way that consumers really understand the information and they can tie that back to the things that they're doing within the home and that their appliances are using. When cell phone companies started coming out and introducing things like, a limited amount of minutes, a consumer pretty quickly understood how to manage their usage of their cell phone against those minutes, right? Because everyone knew what a minute was. They have to keep time. They understand those types of things. As cell phones have evolved to be smartphones, consumers had to adjust that because the cell phone providers stopped charging for minutes. Instead, they were charging for data. But the way in which they helped customers understand that data was providing them tools and notifications to help them understand that, to show that when you're streaming a movie or downloading a song, there's a specific amount of data that comes with it. And so they're, helping them understand those behaviors, whether it's providing an app within the phone that says this particular app used a certain amount of data and this other app used a different amount of data, or notifications to the customer letting them know that they've used a certain amount of data so far. And that's really where the information around energy consumption needs to get to, is both that more real-time feel of it, as well as getting below just the top level of this is how much energy your home used in a day, a week, a month. Because there's so many different things, just like on a smartphone, you use, a typical consumer could use 30, 40, 50 different apps in a single day without being able to show them this is how much each of those different apps used. It's really hard for them to understand why they were using too much data. And the same thing exists within their home. If you just tell a consumer they used, 30 kilowatt hours yesterday, they may have a rough understanding of what a kilowatt hour is, or they may not, but they're probably not going to know what things they did within the home drove that usage, or what they can do to actually improve it. And so a big part of energy data and helping customers understand it is providing it to them in an easy to understand format, in tools and digital communication capabilities that get beyond just a typical, paper bill or printed bill. And so I think getting and encouraging utilities to provide that information in easy to understand ways for consumers, in tools they're more likely to use, is just so important in achieving that.
All right, I'm loving this panel for providing all these great analogies that I can use in later reporting and sound really smart.
There you go.
I didn't hear you do it first. So that's awesome. I appreciate everyone's contributions. Akash, let me loop you in, first of all, in case you have a cool analogy, and also to kind of get your perspective on what Brinks and Sonova are kind of doing here.
No, it's interesting. I don't know if I have any more cool analogies left. It seems like they're all spoken for. I would actually build on what Paul just said about, translating energy data into what consumers can understand. And I will say I'm a huge fan of being able to, gamify it in some way, shape, or form for the consumers to use it. I think, Anne, you had mentioned something about Energy Score, which I will be honest, I don't understand. But the concept generally in my mind makes sense, as that's something that we can do to get the consumers more engaged and understanding. I think Paul said, I can't say that the consumers understand kilowatt hours. So one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing is how do we translate that into more meaningful information and some sort of figuring out a way of consumers engagement by gamifying it, right? I don't even know what kind of games we could create, but I think there is plenty of options for us to think about. But the second thing I would want to do is, maybe nitpick a little bit about, the need for the consumer to actually see this energy data and be able to do something with it. In your opening remarks, Chris, you talked about the consumer research that they've done is consumer says, I want to do it, but I don't want to invest time. So if we start talking about there's a need for the consumers to look at the data and then do something with it, we're asking them to take action. And I don't know if that's really been that successful, especially if they need to do it and they don't want to do it. And I make that distinction, especially in my short stint in the security world, I've seen as even though consumers have a lot of security systems, they may or may not, even though they should arm their system when they leave the house, they may or may not do it. But when the customers have a camera in their home, they actually want to check the camera for whatever reason. So I think we need to figure out a way where we translate this energy data into some form that the consumers actually want to check it, not necessarily having to check it. And I don't know if the dollars are big enough for just the dollars are big enough for them to take that action.
Those are great points. Akash, if I could just chime in, Chris, quickly, we've got some great ideas on how to gamify that experience a little bit. We spend our lives doing this, and I think you're bringing up a couple of interesting points. The dollars right at the very end was an interesting point too that I had on my list to address. $5 to $10 of savings, even if it's a month, isn't really going to motivate that many people. So you have to really look at this holistically. And Paul, some of the things you were saying too rang true. We like to talk about actionable insights at VIP HomeLink. What insights will actually drive an action and have an impact? So we spent a lot of time, uncovering those things, unpacking those things. I think the utilities actually have a lot to offer here in the context of gamification. They know how well you've improved your consumption year over year. They don't show you today on an apples to apples basis. It may have averaged 42 degrees last May and it's 78 degrees this May. So we don't know what we're looking at when we look at our bills or go on their apps. But they know the temperature. They can create those analogies for us, and I think they should. There's also a lot of comparative information that could provide too, which I think would be really interesting. We spend a lot of time telling our members, here's how you're doing as compared to other people on our platform or other people in your state or other people in the United States. There's a lot of sort of gamification there, I think, that could go on to.
Yeah, I would chime in on the gamification. I think is so key, right? I mean, if any of you have teenagers, right? I think we know how powerful gamification can be to keep people engaged. I think another aspect of it is just admitting that, right, changing behavior is hard, and simply monitoring and informing consumers, is not going to drive change. I know my husband monitors and informs me all the time that I leave the bathroom light on, and I still leave it on. So this is where like the whole smart devices integrated into a platform that can really leverage that AI and behavior patterns to then do the work for the consumer. I think, Akash, you said it well, right? Like we have to make it easier. Trying to design and create the recipes that make all of this happen is overwhelming for consumers. And so I think intuitively they understand, hey, I get how this can all work together, but we have to make it where it's very simple. And quite frankly, by then presenting information to consumers where it's in small bites of information, right? Hey, if you do this, or we'll do it for you, like, would you like us to, you lost 4 green energy points, right? By doing this, hey, if you change this, we can do it for you and you'll get 4 energy points. Something like that says, yeah, I do want to make that change. Mm-hmm. And then you're educating the customer in small bits of information, but you're letting the technology make the changes for them so that they continue to live kind of that convenient customer lifestyle that they're looking for, but without the burden of trying to figure it all out at once and programming, their way of life.
Yeah, and I think that we know that consumers really care about these things. I think that's the good thing. We saw out here. I'm sitting in California, and when we had electricity shortage issues last summer, there were huge voluntary reductions by consumers, and the same thing with water in my little town where I live. We had drastic water curtailments of our water rights. People got Flume devices, and we as a town reduced our consumption by 50% because there was an emergency, right? In both of these cases, when there's an emergency, we've seen people step up and take the extra effort, but it just shows the potential is there if we can make it simpler for everybody to do all the time. Yeah.
All right, so simplification being a little bit of a theme here, simplifying the message so people can take action. It can really take 2 forms. So we talked about Jeff's utility in their energy audit. Jamie talks about her technicians kind of giving kind of customized messaging on how people can reduce consumption. But I think there is a little bit of a pros and cons side to personalized versus general. General solution, maybe you can kind of put out to the public. You can keep it very, very simple that way, right? As opposed to the customized one, maybe it makes people take more action because they're having a high touch relationship in that moment with a kind of a human expert consultant type person in their home. So Paul, what do you think in terms of personalized recommendations versus general recommendations. What do you think is the kind of benefits of each kind of approach, or what is your favorite, I guess?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of people have touched on a good point, not just around the personalization, but also the need to simplify and streamline or make it easy for folks to understand, and that there's a percentage of customers that are going to be the lean forward, do it yourself types. They're going to try and figure these things out, and so they're the ones that want access to all the data. They want to see all the different things they could do within their home, and they want to be the ones to figure it out. And for that type of audience, general base of recommendations can be good because they say, these are the things that I could do. I'm going to try and figure it out myself. But then you've got another subset of the population, which is, in all likelihood, pretty large or quite larger than that other subset that is saying, I don't have time to figure these things out. I need to save money, or I want to save money on my bill. If you can tell me something that I should do, I will do that, but I don't have time to figure out. I don't have time to figure out how much I'm going to save on switching out my refrigerator. I don't have time to figure out how much it would help me if I, put insulation or new insulation in my attic. And so that's really where those personalized recommendations and insights really come into play, and the power behind them is that if you can leverage the data that you have access to be able to personally say to an individual, based on how much heat your home is losing, you would benefit from, increasing the insulation or, weatherproofing or things like that in your home, because you're able to, very specifically explain to them, your home is losing heat 2 times faster than a typical home your size. That's usually due to these types of issues where you're losing heat within the home too quickly. That could be your windows, it could be insulation. So you could prompt for an energy audit, or you could say, these are specific programs that your energy provider is offering that would, be a way for you to figure this out better, or, save money on making this upgrade. And so I think there's a healthy balance there of needing to have this content and information available to all, but trying to use things, whether it be leveraging real-time data, artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, to provide those types of more tactical recommendations to folks that want to do better, but just don't know where to start.
So Jeff, you're nodding. Are you nodding because you took that tactical advice and made the changes that your utility auditor recommended in your home? You got to close the loop on that story, and also let us know kind of your perspective on the issue overall.
Apologize. Yeah, it was a great session. I felt like I got smarter, but I didn't do anything. And I think that's the point we're all making here collectively. I got smarter, but I didn't do anything. And I think we live in a world where the majority of people today, I've cited some studies, expect a tailored experience, and we're in that category. And the ability to geo-target, the ability to have a virtual interaction with people, the ability, frankly, when we talk about gamification, we're talking about a tailored experience. I can't really envision any sort of gamification that is not a tailored experience. I think that's really what it's all about. It's about motivating an individual to influence a behavior in our judgment, and that's really where we come from. So it's hard for me to kind of take the other side there. As I said, I think the utilities are in a good place to really influence and leverage the ability to bring big data and behavioral science, frankly, through partnerships, perhaps, into this conversation. I did want to point out too, not to take too much of the conversation around behaviors here. I think there's a lot of great things happening around devices, embedding devices. I was talking to a major builder last week. They're doing a lot with their homes to drive energy efficiency and embed these devices into the homes building. I think that's just a great sign, and obviously the trend toward environmental and everything we read about ESG trends and so forth is, and education to the younger millennial group and in schools, I think is really will aggregate to a phenomenal trend that provides a wind at our back.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's not always about the sexiest stuff that we like to talk about in the space in terms of, acquiring more devices and, being better. Sometimes it's just about making thoughtful decisions as a builder, using a 2x6 instead of a 2x4, so you can put 2 extra inches of insulation and increasing the envelope, things like that. I mean, that's what, whenever I try and engage some builders in some cool smart energy conversation, they want to talk to me about insulation, which is great. But I mean, it's something I keep in mind all the time is like, this is the sensible part of this too, you know, and, but all of these things, you know, in terms of making additions and renovations that improve your efficiency, you know, that's possible for a certain segment of the population. And the people who are getting the deep, you know, experiences where they have a service provider that's coming out and giving them advice and stuff is still sort of one demographic generally. You know, it's the demographic we cover the most as well. It's the sort of 25 to 45-year-olds that make $75,000, $100,000 or more a year that are tech savvy and enthusiastic about this stuff and lean in. But that's fine when I'm talking about who's getting smart doorbells and who's getting security systems and stuff like that. But like energy is consumed by everyone. And it really needs to be something that's, you know, in terms of making a change, both in terms of stabilizing the grid, managing how things go as the EV adoption comes off, but also like climate change needs to take everybody. So, Anne, I noticed that you mentioned hard to reach populations a little bit in your kind of intro. So I wanted to go to you and see kind of how can we bring some of these, the education and familiarity and the data, you know, concepts that are going to help change action to communities that are not generally like having access to renovation funds or, you know, money for devices and things like that.
Yeah, so equity it's really gratifying for me to see that this has finally become such a key consideration now. Should have been all along, but we're finally getting serious about it. It's important, obviously, just because as we modernize the grid, as we bring more electrification online, there's a real risk and expectation that electricity prices can go up, which obviously is going to hurt people with the least means the most. So from that perspective, it's really important. It's also important because there's an urgent need to scale impact, as we just saw from the new IPCC report that came out. They basically say that we have 8 years to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 43%. So there's an urgency here, and unless we have an equitable approach, it's not going to happen. So, and the way that Energy has tackled this challenge is by integrating inclusive eco-financing into that online shopping experience. And so I just thought I would share with you some early results from this experiment, and to just give you, I guess, a sense of hope that it is possible. So we have seen so far with our deployment in California, where we began working with the backing of a state green bank that gives us a loan loss reserve and allows us to lend to people with lower credit scores than we normally would be, and also at lower interest rates. So we see there that of all the purchases on the site, 87% have been financed, which means there's a huge pent-up demand for that support to overcome financial barriers. We're also seeing, though, that the loans are not being taken out just on small devices, low-priced items, but the average cart value has been around $1,400. So people are able then, with eco-financing, to buy major appliances, efficient major appliances, and even, you know, washer dryer pairs and things like that. But the most important thing I wanted to share is that of all these loans, 85% have gone to what's defined as an underserved borrower. That definition I'm using is from the state of California Go Green Home Financing Program. That's the program we get the loan loss reserve from. And within that 85%, 70% are low and moderate income, and 51% are what's called credit challenged, meaning they have a credit score below 640, where you normally wouldn't even be able to get a credit card or other source of capital or loan. And 36% of the loans have gone to people who are both LMI and credit challenged. So really able to serve that demographic that wasn't served before, as well as 27% of the loans have gone to renters, which most people think, well, you know, everything, you know, is up to the building owner, but clearly not. There's a lot of energy using devices that people do have control over as renters. And we also did some, you know, participant surveys. And what we found is that what people like best about the financing offering is the low monthly payments. It's not, they don't really care, how long it is that they have to pay it back. They don't really care so much about the exact interest rate. They just care, can I afford the monthly payments? And that's the number one thing. The second thing is that we don't require a hard credit check. So it doesn't ding your existing credit score, and it allows you to build up your credit score over time with these little monthly payments that are affordable for you to pay back. And then the third thing, which was interesting, I think, for this crowd, is that the online application process for the loan was the third most appealing thing about the setup. And I think this is clearly a carryover from COVID and the acceleration of the trend towards online shopping. But clearly, these demographics are also now very much online, not like they were maybe 5-10 years ago, but the whole market has moved. So we rolled this out initially in California. We're going to be launching the statewide New York marketplace that's only targeting low and moderate income customers. We're launching that next month with NYSERDA together, the state energy office there, just to target that demographic. So I think what we're seeing, and I hope other people are seeing it as well, if we focus on the barriers that really face these traditionally underserved customer segments, then we are able to engage and support a much broader swath of the customer base going forward, which we have to do. Chris, you're on.
My producer muted me, brutal. So while we're having this nice conversation about equitable access, we're gonna balance it out with a really tough question from the audience here. So what incentive do you guys feel that the utilities have to actually invest in these changes? Is the environmental need and the social good need enough?
I'll jump in. I think part of what the utility companies are faced with is increasing demands. I think, Anne, you said it, like the electrification of the home, the adoption of EV is going to put such increasing pressure on the utility companies that, I think 10 years ago, they maybe saw solar and other, renewable sources as a threat. And now I think they see it as a necessity in terms of partnering. And so I think that puts us in a really good position for greater adoption. And to your point of the serving more markets, is that adoption is going to drive down costs. I know in the solar space, right, sales and marketing is a significant component of the costs of the system. And so the ability to drive that adoption and drive costs out will, again, make it more affordable and more broadly. But I think it's a big driver for utilities to partner because of the demand that's going to be on the system.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add to that part of it is the need for them to keep those consumers in some way connected to the grid as a part of it, as things like battery technology increase in efficiency and drop in cost, where it's not necessarily feasible unless you're paying a premium today. And, 5, 7, 10 years, consumers could well have the option to say we're going to completely disconnect from the grid because we can be entirely sustainable for our energy needs without having that connectivity. And from a utility standpoint, the complete disconnect is a threat to the core business because, the opportunity of electrification is important for them. And that is, directly a revenue opportunity for them. But if consumers are seeing opportunities to completely disconnect, not only are they losing that revenue opportunity, but they're losing a revenue base today. And that has, public good impacts as well as then the utilities' core expenses are going to be spread over a smaller, customer base.
Yeah, and then the third, just quick, I think we don't have a lot of time, but the third driver is clearly regulatory. So more and more regulators are actually mandating that a certain amount of budgets or outcomes benefit disadvantaged communities or low and moderate income. So there are actually mandates now more and more across more and more states for utilities actually to do more to serve these segments.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end here as we're running out of time. I heard this at the Smart Energy Summit we had a month ago live. I heard it described as a come to Jesus moment that the utility companies are going to have in terms of their kind of role in our society, kind of coming to be a more important place. And they're going to have to make decisions that are maybe difficult for them. Home solar doesn't necessarily make them more money, but if it adds to grid stability, that's important. There's a lot of discussion about home storage as being the thing that can kind of roll out faster than home solar. And then EVs are actually kind of home storage in their own way. So all of these pieces are going to be moving around together at the same time, right? So it's going to be really interesting to watch going forward. We're going to have some, we got to go to our keynote here, but I really appreciate everything everyone shared today. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you kind of stick around and watch the rest of the day, and we can engage with you guys in the chat.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. So welcome back. That was an awesome first session to hear, and I'm excited to join you all today. My name is Elizabeth Parks. I'm the President and Chief Marketing Officer of Parks Associates. And I'm very excited to welcome Bruce Scher from LG Electronics, head of their energy group, to our virtual stage today. I had the pleasure of meeting him and his team at the Kitchen and Bath Show that was co-hosted with the International Builder Show back in February, and see some of the new products that LG is bringing to market, along with the focus on energy management. So today we're going to talk all about distributed energy resources and what that means, the role of regulations and all of the money coming into the market, which Anne from Energy was just referencing, and then also the future of energy, specifically what does a virtual power plant mean for a consumer, and the impact of different innovations like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and what that means for the load on the grid. So welcome, Bruce. Thank you so much for joining us today virtually. Let's go ahead and see if you can give us a brief introduction of your role and what you're working on this year before we get into some of our questions.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Can you hear me very well?
Yep, you sound great.
Oh, good. I took off my hat because I knew it was a fireside chat.
No, we want the hat on. Let's put that back on for a second.
Okay.
We are in Texas here.
I know. Trying
That's
to feel
awesome.
like a Texan. Actually, it's a little colder up here in the Northeast. So, LG has a tremendous brand name. and as far as appliances in the home. So we're well known in that part of the equation. And what we're doing at LG is trying to bring together all of the devices and solutions that we can offer to homeowners as devices behind the meter. We're calling them distributed energy resources. So we'll offer those under a ThinQ platform to the homeowner, and help them become more active in participating in the energy experience, as opposed to being a passive participant. For years it's been, hey, you know what your price is. There's not much you can do about it, so it's a take and pay, right? You get your power. All you want to know is, did my lights go on? And it's changing, right? The landscape's changing so that there's more participation through demand response programs. There's a lot of other things that consumers can do to help protect against power outages. With the advent of battery storage, for many years, the electric grid as a big machine, it's really one of the only places where you can't store anything. So you have to consume it as soon as it's produced. And that's where the grid comes in. So the grid and the wholesale markets, they have to match up supply and demand all the time. So they're calling on generators in the past, mainly to provide the power. Now consumers, mostly in the commercial industrial space, have been doing this, through demand response, and actually get paid to participate. So the idea is, with LG Energy Solutions, we can help aggregate customers into what we're calling a virtual power plant, and then be able to buy and sell back into the grid as a group, and generate additional revenue. So I think the idea is becoming more active and not as passive. You can help the grid, and you can also make money.
So that's great. You just went through a lot of different things there, but I want to touch on and start really with this relationship that's changing between the customer and the utility, or the consumer and the utility. And so really it's been a one-way relationship for the most part, and we are actively in that transformation, which is really necessary to ensure that we've got enough electricity as more and more electricity is needed. And so tell me more this idea of the prosumer. And I know we talked a lot about this when we were in Florida. What does that actually mean to be a prosumer, and how do these, distributed energy resources, how does that come into play for a consumer being an active participant? And so maybe if you can explain, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I think some of the other panelists that were on before described how you can easily sign up, to be in demand response programs. And so that's becoming more active. When you buy a thermostat, they're remote thermostats. One of the options you have when you start entering your data into the, to program your thermostat, do you want to participate in demand response programs, and we'll pay you $50. That seems pretty easy. All you're committing to do is, if it's air conditioning, raise your temperature of your thermostat maybe for 2 to 4 hours, 4 degrees. Most people aren't going to have issues with that. If my thermostat goes from 70 to 74, I'm not going to feel much change. But it's helping the grid. And I think what your question was around becoming a prosumer, as I said before, it's helping keep the lights on, because you don't want to be in a situation where all these electric vehicles are coming online. We heard about that with the panelists before. And if everyone's charging at the same time, that's going to put a lot of stress on the substations. And the utilities really, at this point, aren't prepared for that. So they're incentivizing customers to install batteries into their homes that can be used on the grid and becoming more active and helping keep the lights on. At the same time, you're getting paid to participate as a prosumer. And I think we heard before talking about nudging people into becoming more participants. I think we have to incentivize as well. It's not just a nudge.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about behavioral change in that previous session. Really interesting comments. And I think we all know how hard it is to get anybody else to do something, let alone to make maybe changes for yourself. So the demand response programs in some ways eliminate that necessary behavior change if it allows for the utility to go in and control specific devices with permission, of course, where you don't have to ask the consumer, you're just doing it because they've opted in. So it seems like a good idea, right? Because then you're not reliant on that behavioral change that everybody thinks is quite necessary. How big can that add up for savings? I mean, is there that much savings if you look at one consumer household with a 4-degree change for 2 hours? I mean, I know you have so much energy background here. Like what kinds of savings are we actually talking if you add that up with multiple houses?
Yeah, and before answering that question, so that the hardware side is the distributed energy resource. That's the DER. Now, if you add an MS to the back of it, you're into DERMS, which is the software platforms that the utilities and aggregators of virtual power plants will use to make those decisions, hopefully on an automatic basis, so that the consumer really doesn't have to be actively involved. They just kind of give here are the things I'm willing to do and things I'm not willing to do. So from the thermostat perspective, and those kind of programs where you might be able to shut a pump, like a pool pump, or just do something with your thermostat, or maybe it's automatic lighting. I think in Orlando, we heard a lot about going into different rooms and your lighting starts adjusting based on what it remembers, on how you like the environment in that room. So those things, $50 a year price range, maybe $100, depending how often you're called to participate. When you start talking about adding battery storage and solar panels that can work in conjunction, right? Because if you just have a solar panel on your home and the sun's not shining, you might not be helping the grid or yourself when it gets dark outside. So the battery can come online during those times and provide the power. What we're seeing is, a lot of the shifting of the peak demand and the charges being higher into the evening now, as opposed to during the day because of the solar production. We saw that in California with what they call the duck curve, right? So you started to see the peaks now happening at night. So the batteries will help that. What I'm seeing in California, higher priced territories in the U.S., you're talking about $500 to $700 a year to participate. Just to be without the incentives. If you're participating in the program of a virtual power plant, as I'm calling it, so that you have DERMS. The DERMS software is automating this and helping to send checks, to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really gets to this terminology of the orchestration of the grid, right? The ability to kind of move that load around and stop and start it with lots of different integration. There's so much that we could talk about there, but I want to move on to the regulatory environment and really these huge, big government investments that we see coming down. So there's $3.1 billion from Biden's infrastructure law to help really lower utility bills. I know North Carolina's program was allocated at $75 million, where this law called the Weatherization Assistance Program, or WAP, is really working to help address the whole home with everything from devices to insulation and just common sense behavioral actions and and really highlighting that to the consumer. So I'm curious, from your view, where do you think this money should be invested and how should it be spent? It's a ton of money, and of course, it's our taxpayer dollars. So
Yeah.
we all should, if we don't, have a great interest in how it's being spent, and would love your view on maybe where you think the best return on investment would be for some of these dollars coming down.
Yeah, great questions. We've been through this before, back in like 2008, 2009 timeframe. There was stimulus money that really went into, smart meters that the utilities used, doing some demonstration projects around demand response. Back then, I called it Obama dollars. I guess now we're calling it Biden dollars. So I think the electrification that's needed with upgrading substations would be really important, where some of that money would go. Just recently, I heard 7.5 billion might be set aside to have fast charging stations, within 50 miles of each other. That'll incentivize myself and others to want to have an electric vehicle, because if you're traveling, we're not traveling as much as we used to. It's due to COVID, but for instance, yesterday I drove 6 hours to get to an appointment. And if I had an electric vehicle, I've got to be really concerned about that charging, right? And how I'll be able to do that. So I think the electric vehicles will need that fast charging stations, just like we have with gas stations. And clearly the battery storage piece, I think, is important to invest in as well.
Okay, great. And we've also seen a lot of new laws, especially starting out in California with the home builders and any new home builds, and these requirements that are either to add solar or the electric charging station as part of, I guess, the new code. And I know that's, kind of spreads from California and then moves along to maybe Arizona and wherever else next. So any comments on those new rules coming down? And then how does that work out on the builder side? I mean, if they're going to do it as standard in California, will that just take hold really for any region that they might be in across the U.S.?
Yeah, so a lot in those questions. Of course, you like to hear about FERC Order 2222. So that's coming up, and that'll help generate more revenue when that gets adopted through the grid operators, and that'll be done on a regional basis. So that will allow distributed energy resources to participate in the wholesale markets and get paid fairly, compared to the best opportunity, I think, is to not generate an electron. That's better for the environment. So that'll encourage using renewables to not only drive down the cost, but also be more sustainable and have negative. You're producing your own energy. You're not relying on the grid. As far as home builders, I mean, that's one of the markets that we're focused on because we have so many, LG appliances that have come out that are 2 to 3 times more efficient than others in the HVAC market with water heating. And what we're also partnering with are companies that have what I'll call remote smart breakers, so that that can be installed alongside of the battery and separate out control of the larger loads that'll help when it comes to shifting something off and not having to worry that you've cut off the wrong breaker. So it'll have that remote breaker capability in the home. So that would fit in very nicely with a home builder, where they can just put the panel in initially, and it's connected to, let's say, a battery or to a HVAC device.
Okay, great. And this sounds a lot like in the broadband world, which we also study quite closely. They're introducing managed services to consumers, where basically the network is being able to be bifurcated in different ways and then added services and value as a result of where the data is being, going throughout the house and the control capabilities. So is that kind of a parallel that you would agree with?
Definitely. I think data is the new gold.
Yeah.
So getting the data, being able to show that in a meaningful way to the homeowner. I have, on my phone, I can look at how much energy I'm using in a home, just by looking at an app. It's called ThinQ Energy is the name of our app. And it's not an app just for app's sake, because I think there's a lot of apps out there, and the last thing someone needs is, one more app to look at. But getting that data is important to not only the homeowner, but to someone who's making optimization decisions on when is the right time to ask for the energy to be sold back to the grid. So the price of energy changes on an hourly basis, and most people don't know that. So it can drive up, and we saw it in Texas. I'm sure you saw it.
Yeah,
When you lose power. So I think that, having the data, being able to have connectivity when you need it. One of the prop tech companies that I've saw recently is using electric vehicle chargers to create their own network that's not dependent on wireless networks, which I thought was a pretty novel idea, right?
Yeah, there's definitely tons of innovation going on, and that data is gold. I think even 10 years ago, and big data was the big word,
Yeah, right.
and the gold
IoT,
mine, and now we're figuring out which data, which pieces of data are the most critical, and then how can you have some analysis behind that for really meaningful information. So great points there. I want to move on and talk about the future. And also, I really want to make sure we get into this Bitcoin and cryptocurrency stuff, because this is actually something that I really do not know a lot about, but I've read some more since we talked about adding this to the conversation, because there's a lot of new innovation kind of everywhere, and disruption and change as a result of technology, and it can impact different areas. And so with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, we see that there is a potentially very large impact on electricity usage. So would you mind kind of giving us an explanation for the layperson, sort of dumbing it down for us in terms of what are we talking about here, and why does it matter?
So this area is as curious to me as the universe. It's a new thing that's coming in, but it's computing power. You need to add hundreds of megawatts to the grid at one location with basically their computer systems to generate these NFTs and the cryptocurrency and the Bitcoin mining. And what I'm concerned about is, number one, the electric vehicles coming online and not actually being coordinated on when those are coming on, charging, when you're charging your EV. But when you start adding 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, popping up in certain areas, a lot of the Bitcoin, from what I've found out, a lot of the Bitcoin plants that were in China are now being moved to the US. So, we're adopting a lot of that growth in technology on the Bitcoin side. And if it's not coordinated with the utility, because they're going to look for the cheapest power, and hopefully that's renewable. So I would say, let's invest in Bitcoin companies that have renewable power, number one. And number two, let's make sure when a new plant comes online that it's coordinated in a way that it's not going to be a draw on the substations, which will increase costs for ratepayers if the utility has to, add a new substation to handle that new load. I was talking to someone earlier today who said that one of the Bitcoin companies put their farm right next to a nuclear plant so that they could get the power really quickly, which might sound like a good decision now, but we're seeing we need a mix of power plants, but that's a little risky too. I think if the nuclear plant for some reason had to be decommissioned, they're going to need a different power source. So the cryptocurrency piece is very interesting in itself, to try to understand what's going on, and creating these blockchain ledgers and how people pay for things. I don't know if you saw the Bored Apes, but those are going for like 300,000 a piece.
Yeah, I've seen some really crazy stuff with the values on this, and it's hard to comprehend some of it. But there was one report that referred to electricity being consumed in the amount of 1,173 kilowatt hours per Bitcoin transaction. And that number is the same as an average 2,000 square foot house in Texas for a month of energy usage, which is also referenced around the $170 or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking a lot of
energy. Of draw.
Yeah. And so that brings up, and it's a very interesting topic, but it does bring up this bigger conversation about just really not having enough energy and the EVs. And been reading a lot of really interesting perspectives on this idea of kind of running out of power and how is this going to be solved. And a lot of the electrical companies like NREL saying, no, this is great. Our job is to provide energy and sell energy. And so it's not going to be a problem, and we're going to work it out. And so from your view, I mean, do you think there's going to be an issue with keeping power reliable, or is this just a matter of this new orchestration that is going to have to go on and it's happening and it will get there? Or will the cost of electricity, because demand becomes so high, just go straight up? What do you think we're going to expect for the near and long-term future?
Yeah, it's unintended consequences. I think, technology gets us out of trouble, but sometimes it puts us, into some perilous situations. My sense is that you need permitting, you need interconnection. These things don't get built in a day. So, there is a lot of advance notice that goes into building these plants. They may take over a vacant site where, the power is less in cost. But again, I think what we should have are some standards around new crypto sites going in, and potentially having a more sustainable, renewable flavor to it, so that it's not drawing a lot of power, from the existing grid, and it can be helping provide power back to the grid when the grid needs it. There was one example years ago about nuclear submarines that came up for, plugging into the grid when they're not being used. I thought that was pretty interesting, right? So there's a lot of ideas to help solve issues as they come up. So if we fast forward and put in a lot more battery technology, I think it'll solve the problem.
Well, that's great. And we just have about 2 minutes left, and I'd really like to end talking about virtual power plants. And so this idea of all these distributed energy resources, and then those being able to come together, does this mean that there is really this paradigm shift in the future with that becoming that two-way instead of a one-way kind of relationship? And could you maybe comment on that a little bit further? And that'll probably have to be our closing comments. It's amazing how quickly 30 minutes goes by with you.
Then I can put my hat back on. So the EV chargers are going to become more bi-directional. So you'll see that coming into play in the homes. As far as the virtual power plant idea, we were thinking of the virtual power plant 10 to 12 years ago. I think we were ahead of our time when I co-founded a company. Eventually, it got morphed into more of a battery storage company before it was sold. But the idea is, and I've used this before, the power of many. So by yourself, you feel like you're not really contributing as much if you just raise your thermostat 4 degrees on a hot day. If a whole community, though, starts to do this and acts together in a coordinated effort, you start to feel more of a group. And potentially you see a lot of these community aggregations where they go out and they buy power together. And that's a perfect area to concentrate, to now start to add some devices, these DERs, to that same network. And then they can become a virtual power plant and help not only help the grid, but also have more reliability. One of the other folks earlier talked about microgrids as a threat to the utility, right? That you could disconnect. I think it has to be two-way, that you're helping the utility. I know I feel better that that I am connected to the utility. I'm not necessarily looking to disconnect, but trying to help in a coordinated effort with your neighbors, with your community, in creating this virtual power plant is here now. And there's a way for it to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our research shows that like half of broadband households have an interest in saving energy, and the idea of community energy savings, especially in the multifamily side, with these ability to build applications and features specifically around energy management is going to draw in that consumer segment who cares that much. And certainly lots of people willing to pay for these types of solutions to save costs, but also to be participants in reducing energy consumption. So, Bruce, it is such a pleasure to have you join us. And so I want to thank you for your valuable time today. And we hope to see you in person soon again. And we will be right back for our next session. So thank you again for joining us, and give us just a minute. We'll see you soon.
Okay, welcome back. We are ready to launch into our next panel discussion. I'm Jennifer Kent. I'm Vice President of Research at Parks Associates, and so pleased to be leading a discussion really focused around the smart thermostat and its role in residential energy management, and also the role that utilities play, utility partnerships play in driving smart thermostat adoption and use in the home. And so I'm so pleased to welcome our panelists today. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and introduce their organizations before we dive in. Before I do that, I would love to remind everyone that you're welcome to ask questions of our panelists in the Q&A tab or the chat tab. We'll see them either way. And then there's also a polling tab. And so I'll be taking a look at the results of some of those polling questions during this panel. So please go ahead and get your polling answers in if you have not yet done so. So with that, I'm so pleased to start with Boris Besner. He's the CEO of Okos Smart Homes. Boris, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Hi, thank you. So yes, Okos works with utilities to bring the leading edge technology of smart homes to their clients. So we're helping the adoption of smart thermostats, for example, with professional installation services that eases that adoption and connection rate. We also help with DR program and smart home solutions as a whole with utilities.
Fantastic. Well, Boris, so glad to have you with us and to hear a little bit more during the panel about your experience in the industry and what you're seeing here with smart thermostats as part of that larger smart home solution and really what the players there for utilities. Great. Okay, next up we have Carrie Binley, who's the Senior Manager of Energy Partnerships at ecobee Energy. Hey, Carrie.
Hello, thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Carrie Binley with ecobee Energy, and we were the makers of the very first Wi-Fi smart thermostat. And today we work with utilities to offer a number of consumer programs and utility programs from demand response to time of use optimization, energy efficiency. We also work with utilities to deliver income qualified programs for those communities that are have a high energy burden, and also with utility marketplaces. So I'm here today to talk or to help people learn about all kinds of things around smart thermostats. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Carrie, thanks so much for being with us. Okay, next up we have Abigail Dakin, who's an environmental engineer with the Energy Star program with the US EPA. Abigail, tell us a little bit more about your role with Energy Star and the program specifically with smart thermostats that you've worked on and shaped.
Hi, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I am I manage the specification for Energy Star smart thermostats and have since the beginning in 2017 when we launched the program based on a groundbreaking metric that demonstrates energy savings based on analysis and aggregation of data from actual homes of actual users. The Energy Star is important to the adoption of smart thermostats because utilities have found we work closely with the utility partners as well as working directly with consumers on things like a holiday promotion guide that includes thermostats and a number throughout the year of promotions that include thermostats. And then for utility partners, the addition of Energy Star branding to their promotions of their incentives in their territories to their customers has been shown to increase click-through rates up to 60%. And that's based on the fact that over 90% of consumers recognize the Energy Star label and what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. A really powerful brand there and a really simple way for those who were able to listen to the earlier sessions and talking a lot about how to raise consumer awareness and understanding of what's happening in the energy space and how to be more efficient. Obviously, Energy Star has really led the way there. So Abigail, thanks so much for joining us. Next, we have Sean White, who's the Director of Commercial and Industrial Programs at Xcel Energy. Hi, Sean.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I work at Xcel Energy. It's an integrated utility that operates in 8 Midwestern and Southwestern states. We've been running energy efficiency and demand response programs since the mid-1980s. and we're proud to say that, for the last several years we've exceeded a terawatt hour in energy savings, helping our customers save energy and money. In demand response, operating for about that long, our controllable load in those programs rival our largest power plants, and so we've got a great portfolio of long-term customer relationship types of programs that allow us to draw on those customers at times of need. My title is as commercial and industrial programs, but through a quirk of organizational changes, I do have the entire demand management team covering all segments, which is why I'm here today. So thank you, Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Lots of people in new roles these days. So congratulations on that. And we do have a panelist, Sean He from WISE, who I hope is able to join us a little later. So if he is able to hop into the conversation, we'll certainly welcome him. So I'd love to start off with really just setting the scene for sort of the state of the smart thermostat market. I'm going to go to Carrie first here. Ecobee really the founder of the category with over a decade since launch of the Ecobee smart thermostat. Parks Associates data shows that between 11 to 13% about of U.S. households with broadband internet report having a smart thermostat today or owning a smart thermostat today. Some of the households that were sort of in the early adopter stage, have rushed out to get them, and now we've got some work to do on engaging the rest of the market. But really interested to hear, Carrie, from your perspective, where we kind of are with smart thermostats in the landscape of the connected home today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right in that the early adopters have really done a great job of starting this category. But now we're moving along that adoption curve and heading to that next phase of adoption. And so what we're seeing is that in this time as we move, number one is that folks are more interested in getting their devices installed as opposed to the DIY. So we're seeing a strong push towards that. We're also seeing that folks who are moving or having what we call moments that matter in their life, where they're having change, like buying a new house or remodeling their home. That's when they're most apt to purchase these types of devices. And then lastly is that, we're really seeing that customers who kind of we call them the frenzied family, are the folks that really are looking for technology to help ease some of the pains in their life. And also folks who have kind of a planet positive ethos and don't know what they can do about it. Things like smart thermostats can help them feel a little bit better about their involvement in doing a little part in climate change.
Mm-hmm. So even though, Carrie, kind of to follow up with you here, again, 11 to 13% is still pretty early when we think about other technologies that are massively adopted, like smartphones and TVs, right? There is an installed base of, tens of millions of smart thermostats, out there. In a way that when this market was first getting started, maybe wasn't necessarily the case. And so do you feel like that, sets the foundation for kind of a new phase of smart thermostat, use holistically and, the energy vision?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think we're seeing a slowdown at all in people purchasing devices. We're also seeing new folks come into the market with lower priced products. That is a typical response or a typical way in which to increase market share over time. So absolutely, smart thermostats continue to be, a very customer-friendly product. And I believe that customers do purchase smart thermostats for the energy benefits. And we have a large number of those folks participating in energy programs. So 100% think it's still a very viable and interesting product for customers.
Sean, I'd love to hear from the utilities point of view, you know, from Xcel's point of view, how, what the role is for the utility in encouraging adoption of smart thermostats, right? And the best strategies maybe you're seeing to do that, whether that's through energy efficiency rebates or even full subsidization with a DR participation, right? There's different levers that you can pull. What are you seeing at Xcel that's successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you kind of started with the role of the utility, and you know what our stakeholders and regulators want us to do is to remove market barriers, you know, to accelerate adoption of technologies that will help customers save on their bills and reduce carbon. And that's we are uniquely placed to do that because of our connection to you know, those customers through their energy usage. With smart thermostats, the beauty of that technology is where energy efficiency and demand response have been in almost their own silos for a long, long time. This is a technology that bridges across, and so we actually have combo programs for them and offering, just as you stated, you know, you can get one rebate for the inherent energy savings that people see with smart thermostats, and another rebate on top of that, or an ongoing credit for partnering with us to reduce usage when we have system needs to do that. Certainly, one of the most effective, especially after we get, you know, past that early adopter kind of a stage, is the direct installs, and you know, fully subsidizing and providing a direct install mechanism for customers has kept participation, or have kept prospective participants coming to the table and looking at the technology. Various marketing tactics have worked as well. You know, we've got an online store that we run Black Friday deals on that still gets quite a bit of activity when we can align with broader, you know, societal messaging and efforts, and even just excitement around that. So those kinds of things have really kept you know, the effectiveness going. And it's also, you know, the great partnerships that we have with folks like ecobee and some of the other manufacturers in being able to push education and messaging to the customers that have smart thermostats, even some that aren't participating in those demand response type events. We can really continue to get the message out versus you know, mail-in rebate kind of an activity. So it's smart thermostats have really opened the door to a lot more engagement with customers than perhaps we've gotten in the past.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to follow up real quick on the, you know, it sounds like you're pulling all sorts of different levers there. You mentioned direct installs as being particularly impactful. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works with Xcel? So are there proactive programs where you're rolling trucks to do direct installs, or it's upon the request or purchase being made by someone in your footprint, or, you know, some other, or they're already going to be coming out to the home for a different reason, and so an install is happening at that time, right? How does that type of program work?
Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up a good point. There are options for participation. So you know, proactive communication, generating interest, generating inquiries, but then also a choice of, do you want to bring your own device and sign up for a program, get a, you know, rebate after the fact? Do you want to purchase the thermostat from us as another option and get an instant rebate? And then we don't even require that you sign up for the demand response program. We just sweeten the deal if you do, and get some ongoing value to those customers. From a direct install, choosing one of those options, and so we contract for the fulfillment of that with local installers and things like that. We're not actually sending a bucket truck to people's houses, but we partner with folks to do that on demand. Some of our programs, we partner with other programs that we offer, like the Home Energy Squad, that's going in and doing weatherization and light upgrades for customers, and we'll do a community blitz there where they can and are trained in direct installing. So so if it's like you said, we're using all kinds of tactics. So the push with the Home Energy Squad, and then the direct marketing to get people to come to us.
Great. Well, so, Boris, that actually speaks a lot, I think, to what you're doing at Okos Smart Homes. Can you tell us from your perspective in the work that you're doing with utilities, what seems to be really effective in growing engagement and adoption of smart thermostats with consumers at home?
Of course. So right now, what we're seeing working in the market, mainly with the utility clients, is with professional installation included. So we're the one actually with the truck roll going in and installing thermostats to actually get that connection rate up. We've seen some previous research where they just sent out free thermostats, even without the client actually paying anything for the thermostat. It's still not a good enough incentive to actually use it in some cases. So we're seeing low single-digit connection rate, even though you sent out thousands of thermostats. It's just sitting on the shelf. So to be there and actually connect it was a big value add, especially for the utilities, since they want them to use it and they actually participate in the programs. So we have the ability to be there on site, program it, enroll the client right in the programs, and set up the thermostats with the better settings. For example, ecobee has a great program with Eco Plus that we can actually save even more for the client and really remove those barriers to the adoption.
Now, oftentimes, correct me if I'm wrong, with Okos, you're not just focusing on a smart thermostat. That there actually might be a larger play with other smart home devices kind of wrapped around that. Can you tell us a little bit about what the interest from the utility, might be there, as far as a larger revenue play, or what's kind of the full strategy around going beyond thermostats?
So going for the whole home and everything in the smart home, so thermostats and door locks, security, going more of a rounded approach to the client makes it more attractive to the client. So we're seeing more adoption to offer all that for the house, and B, a revenue play for the utilities. So we do revenue share with utilities, and therefore gaining that customer adoption to not only the thermostat for a few $100s, but a whole house for a few thousand. So then you're getting more of that rounded approach to smart home and getting more data from the client by being in that home.
Well, so Abigail, in your opening comments, you mentioned, the power of the Energy Star brand and the specifications that, you've written specifically to smart thermostats. So help us understand a little bit better when it comes specifically to smart thermostats, how Energy Star helps to drive adoption and use of smart thermostats, and how the others in the ecosystem, can better understand the role that Energy Star plays there.
Sure. So particularly as we move beyond early adopters who are interested in going for a nice piece of technology that is going to be slick on their wall. But when we're talking about the sort of Joe homeowner, for them, the power of the Energy Star mark as a trusted mark of energy savings is considerably more powerful. And then from our perspective, we have seen before that, particularly with controls, which are tricky, having them in the home can lead to energy savings, but not necessarily. And so for utilities that want the assurance that energy savings will in fact result, as well as DR opportunities, of course, which are incontrovertible, will occur from putting out these products, the idea of having them be backed up with a specification which bases labeling on whether products at the time they are certified and continuing, a random sample of consumers are using these thermostats for setback in such a way that energy is actually being saved in that home compared to not using setback. So that was with programmable thermostats always the problem. And so that kind of assurance is helpful for freeing up utility, less risk for utility, helps free more investment.
Got it. Absolutely. And you think that consumers, think about smart thermostats a different way when they're thinking about energy efficiency, right? So if you're buying an appliance and you see an Energy Star rating, it means, this energy consuming device is hopefully using less, or we can be confident in that it's using less energy, right? From a thermostat, it's this shift to proactively, not just the device itself is energy efficient, but it's actually making other things, my use of in my home is more energy efficient. And so it seems like the first step in helping consumers think about energy efficiency beyond what the device is doing and more about systems or how the home is using energy.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, we've developed the Energy Star Smart Home Energy Management System criteria as well. So that's a specification, and we now have our first certified system, by the way. That's a specification that does look at homes that have just a smart thermostat, not just a smart thermostat, but also other smart home devices such as smart plugs or outlets and connection to large energy using devices such as water heaters, and also use occupancy sensing to improve the amount of energy you can save when you are not home and not using your home, the same way that smart thermostats do. And the key in our mind is to make it simple for consumers. There will always be the energy nerds who are going to get the very most, squeeze every drop of savings out, but most of us just don't have time for that. And so effective devices and systems which can be demonstrated to deliver savings without burdening the consumer with a great deal of consideration and thought, that's the key to making broad adoption of energy saving controls happen.
That really goes alongside some research that we conducted in 2021 regarding the types of insights that consumers want to see generally when it relates to the smart home. We asked, would you rather, are you more the type of person who would like to be able to see very customizable settings, personalized data, feel like an expert and all the controls at your fingertips, or automate what can be automated, do it for me, right? Set and forget it. And it's almost evenly split. We have got 50% of consumers in each group, and oftentimes in the same household, right? You have somebody who wants that insights and somebody who wants things automated. We actually had a question from the audience in the first panel that I'd actually love to surface here because I think it's really relevant. So we had an audience member ask, is taking a dual approach wise, where both general and personalized approaches are leveraged? So using something like a smart home, monitor, smart plug, something that can help homeowners generally understand their behavior, but also there might be personalized, gamified type customized solutions. How do you hit that mark for the people who want more information and people who want it automated? It's kind of an open question. Maybe Abigail, if you have any thoughts on that, or Carrie, I can bring you in as well.
Sure. It's an interesting question. I like solutions that allow either. Of course, I'm one of those energy nerds. It's interesting. I know that for myself, I have the intention of becoming an expert in a lot of things that I do. But then when it's competing with all of the other things I might spend my time on, I don't necessarily follow up on that intention. And so having a automated system to fall back on for me personally would be really helpful.
Yep, absolutely. Carrie, do you have anything to add to that?
Honestly, I find your findings kind of interesting because, my experience when I was at a utility is that what we found was that customers could give a flying flip about energy. And so I think that I'd like to meet those 50% that really want all that data. That being said, I think generally speaking, as an industry, we approach customers all in the same way, right? And just say we want you customer to do this at the maximum level. We want all of our customers to like have a 4-degree setback on a DR strategy. And I think what we need to think about as an industry is how can we talk to customers in a way, whether that's through gamification or through data as an output, but to say like what's important to you? Like when we go to our financial advisors, they ask us what kind of risk we want to take, and then they customize a portfolio. So how can we work with our customers to give them the experience that they want based on what their needs are, whether that's, you know, how we interact with them from their energy settings to the data that we provide, and then how can we use gamification to better understand maybe what their risk tolerance is.
Yep. And to be transparent, so that research was about smart home controls generally, not just energy specific.
Okay, great.
Right.
Thank you.
And so right. And so there's all sorts of different insights you can get throughout the connected home related to safety, security, occupancy, energy, entertainment, all sorts of things. So so just wanted to not misstate our own data. So, you know, one thing that came up strongly in our live event, and I think is maybe somewhere that we're still a little bit behind today, is showing insights that matter in the way that consumers think about it, where, you know, I might not have any idea the difference between a megawatt or a gigawatt or anything like that, but I know dollars make sense to me. And it seems like through utility partnerships, you know, my smart thermostat should be able to know my plan and prove to me that it saved such and such amount of dollars, and it's still not necessarily very common today. You know, I guess Carrie and Sean, if either of you guys have any thoughts on how we can get the insights, you know, that matter in the language that consumers use, right? And ECO maybe have some programs, you know, or partnerships that are able to do that today, but I know that not all the smart thermostats in the market, you know, do offer that tight integration to be able to show that to the user. Are we going there?
Please, Carrie.
Oh. Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question specifically, but one example that we have of trying to communicate to customers differently is that in our feature that's called Eco Plus, one of the things that we do is we allow the customer to choose what's important to them. And so we use a bit of gamification in the sense that there's this essentially a money tree. And when you slide the slider level to the left, that means you prefer comfort, and to the right is that you want to save money. And that money tree grows and dies depending on which way you slide it. So it's not communicated around kilowatts or gigawatts or megawatts or anything like that. It's really about what is important to you. Is it money savings or comfort? And so I think that's a good example of, you know, trying to make it easy for customers to understand what their participation actually means.
Yep, absolutely. And Sean, if you had something to add to that, interested in your thoughts as well.
Yeah, and my mind goes to, you know, what information, what data can we feed to, you know, folks like Carrie to deliver to the customers that are using their equipment. And it's really a dynamic and changing place. Today, you know, you utilize a lot of averages and baselines, assumed baselines. Getting to this specific customer saved, you know, this specific amount of money is our challenge and our opportunity. You know, there's technology investment that has to occur on our side, whether that's, you know, beginning with smart meters and then getting into tools that can analyze, evaluate, and then push that information to others. You talked a lot about the flexibility. Can I choose automated or manual control, or, you know, utilization of algorithms and those kinds of things? Well, that all changes the baseline. And so, you know, the feedback loop to determine what one customer actually saved or how they impacted their bill is a future state, you know, and it is something we want to pursue. Today, when we use that messaging, it's based on those baselines and those assumed values that we can be relatively certain of, but they're not very dynamic.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Can I jump in on that question for a second?
Please, Abigail. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that to Sean's point, the question is saved for that customer versus what? Versus their old thermostat? Well, what happens if they had a baby at around the time they changed thermostats? What happens if they added an electric vehicle? What happens if they got a better refrigerator or put an air conditioner in their addition? It's very difficult to pull those pieces out. The other thing is that if we were able to use smart thermostats to cut 5% off the nation's energy use, which is not unachievable, that would be a massive win for smart thermostats. But for a household, 5% off their energy bill, $40 to $80 a year. It's not a tremendous amount for each household, which reflects the reality that we are very fortunate that we get such comfort in our homes for so little cost. It's amazing. So I am not sure that individual home savings is necessarily the best, from energy efficiency is necessarily the most effective message for pushing smart thermostats. On the other hand, in spaces that are utility areas, and Sean, maybe you want to comment on this or anybody else, that are starting to adopt time of use rates or any other time varying rate, or somehow giving customers some way of understanding the time value of their use of energy, smart thermostats can suddenly start to make a big difference, as well as other smart home devices. In addition, we all know smart thermostats provide savings to utilities based on load flexibility that are above and beyond, as well as, consumer amenity that we wouldn't necessarily have been able, that you can't communicate with just a dollar figure.
All great points. Sean, did you want to comment on that as well? Especially the point here that, if it's not energy costs that really and energy savings that are going to drive individual engagement with an actual use of the smart thermostat, not only adoption, right? Are there, other use cases that matter more, time of use, right? And coordinating those types of activities.
Yeah, I mean, Abigail's term of load flexibility is just a hallmark of our future strategy. I just get really excited when we start talking about that because, supply is getting more dynamic. We've got, massive conversions occurring around more renewable supply, with the challenge being it's intermittent. And how do we ensure reliability? Making customers a partner in that, I think is our next great opportunity. And we're taking some efforts, to do that. We're trying to quantify and identify the value of dropping load when renewables are coming on or going off of, our grid. Rate arbitrage, even localized capacity events. Our demand response resources have really been bulk system kinds of capacity resources. But, we've probably had, especially on the natural gas side, 40, 50 control events that we've been able to geo-target because the gas system wasn't constrained globally. It was constrained at the end of the line. And so we could work with the customers that would impact that localized constraint versus, the price of natural gas is off the charts on a national scale. It's that flexibility that is really going to be our new frontier in my mind.
Yep. Well, I'd love to share the results of the first polling question that we had in here for folks today, which was, what will increase the adoption of smart energy products generally the most? And the options that we gave to them to answer from included rising energy costs, increased interest in climate change prevention, growth in EV adoption, growth of the smart home industry, and the ability for consumers ultimately down the road to participate in energy markets and the effects of FERC 2222, And the number one thing actually that came back, 42% said growth of the smart home industry. And the second thing was rising energy costs that, to Abigail's point, we're very fortunate to be able to have very comfortable lives at home for relatively cheap. And so higher costs would drive more energy consumption. But interesting to me that 42% said growth of the smart home industry. I'd love to go back to Boris on that for your thoughts on the results of that poll, given kind of the wider work that you do around thermostats and a whole smart home play.
Yeah, we've definitely seen more interest from customers when including a whole house as a whole smart home play, rather than focusing only on energy. The security is a big thing, ease of use, just having that easy adoption with the installation, educating the client into how they can simply increase comfort rather than just focusing on energy. You actually have automations and different scenes that you can set up in your house with a whole setup that really increases the interest from customers.
Okay, interesting. Wondering if that to me that was very surprising result of the poll. But really, the thermostat is part of the larger smart home, and coming out of the pandemic, we actually saw quite a rise in adoption of other devices besides smart thermostats in the home. So devices like cameras, security systems, video doorbells, lights, all rose in adoption throughout the pandemic, whereas thermostats actually stayed very, very stable, sort of stalling out over the past 3-4 years. So that gives a little context for me, at least for those results of the poll. But interested in anybody else taking a stab at that, or opining why you think that we're seeing a little bit of plateauing of smart thermostat adoption.
I can throw out a theory. It's just a theory. There's been smart thermostats, as they move towards more professional install, they may have suffered the same fate that a lot of professional install equipment suffered, that people did not want others in their home, and so they put it off a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of it.
That's a great point, Abigail. And also, the fact that we mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I'd love to come back to it, that many of the innovators, early adopters, folks who are interested in technology, a lot of that demand may have been met at this point, right? And it's this hard work of engaging the rest of the mass market to think about energy, to think about smart thermostats in their home beyond just, let's say your HVAC goes out, you need a new HVAC system, right? There's some emergency purchase or a replacement or a move. To Carrie's point, the movers, right, where that triggers a purchase. So perhaps there's more that needs to be done in order to drive thermostats to take that next leap. So I'd love to switch a little bit. We've got about 15 minutes left to really talk about the future of what's possible and the new sensors and functions that are coming into the thermostat market. One thing is that when the smart thermostats first came out, right, we're looking at the main value proposition of remote control and remotely seeing, the temperature in your homes, and then getting to adaptive learning, voice control, right, within the thermostat. So what's really the edge features that you see differentiating smart thermostats today? And happy to go back to you, Abigail, and then maybe over to Carrie.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're about mass market adoption. Energy Star is really about moving energy-saving technologies from early mass market to main mass market adoption. That's our sweet spot. And I think in some ways, smart thermostats as an entire category were a exciting new technology that could really lead to energy savings. And I guess what I'm interested in is taking what exists now as a not so new technology, a technology that has a strong market foothold, and moving it more towards mass market adoption. So the feature that I'm most interested in is one that, to tell you the honest truth, I wish that I could identify the products easily that already have this feature, but we can't. And that's that, somebody mentioned, Boris mentioned that the connectivity rates can be very low for a lot of smart thermostats that aren't using professional install and aren't using a service like the one that Okos offers. And what's interesting is there are a few smart thermostats on the market that do not, most of them rely on running algorithms in the cloud in order to run their energy saving features. That is not true for all of them. There is at least one product that has an adaptive learning feature that is the intelligence to run that feature exists in the thermostat that's on the wall. So even if it never gets connected, it's still going to provide most of the energy saving features. Now, it won't be able to be updated, for instance, with the Eco Plus feature that ecobee rolled out to everyone, but it's certainly better than nothing. And it would be great to see more of that.
Oh, what I meant by connected was not even to Wi-Fi, but actually connected to the wall. Like most people don't want to take out and go through wires. So having that professional install actually puts it on the wall or out of the box.
Okay, well, there's then there's the second thing, right? I mean, it varies from manufacturer to manufacturer, but all manufacturers have a certain percentage of customers that buy the thermostat and put it on the wall, but never connect it to Wi-Fi. Or, of course, it becomes disconnected because they change their Wi-Fi password and they don't think, oh, now I have to update my thermostat.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carrie, and then maybe Sean, you can speak to, the next generation of smart thermostat features. And also if you're running into this, maybe on the utility side where you have programs where you have sent out thermostats and they're never actually getting connected, or they're falling off of, out of a program because they've lost connectivity. What are some strategies for dealing with those problems? But Carrie, to you first on kind of the next generation of value that you can get out of smart thermostats.
Yeah, so I can think of three off the top of my head that I find really interesting personally. One is time of use optimization. So ecobee has a time of use feature that really automates the behaviors that we're looking for from customers to change their usage during those higher peak times. Secondly is ecobee has door and window sensors. And so if you have a door or window sensor and you leave your window open for over a certain period of time, or your door open, it'll actually turn the air conditioning off. So that way you're not, throwing money out the window. Seriously. And then, I live in California, and in the month of August, it's typically on fire. So having air quality sensors on a smart thermostat, I think, is also really helpful for the health and safety of folks in the house.
And just to come back to you, Carrie, too, of course, we were watching when we saw ecobee announce your monitoring, adding a security play on top of the thermostat, where the thermostat can be a hub, and you've got occupancy sensors, taking the information from the sensors, and then the thermostat as a hub to enter into a kind of a totally different value proposition around security is really interesting. Ton of change happening in the security space as well. Tell us a little bit about, the strategy there and what you see as the opportunity for companies like ecobee, but then also others in the energy space to be crossing into the security play.
Well, I think it goes to, your research that you just presented, which is, 42% of folks, 42% of folks think that smart thermostats, or I forget what the stat was, but it's about this ecosystem of products, right? And I think that our customers are interested in having, it's not a closed garden approach with the ecobee home monitoring, but folks like to have the same manufacturer and different products and services, what we like to call one pane of glass, as far as your apps and your customer experience. So I think our take or strategy is to really add additional value for our customers and leverage the smart thermostat again as the hub and another occupancy sensor and way of enabling this other technology, which is the cameras and the door and window sensors.
Okay, great. Sean, to you, what are you looking for in the kind of future evolution in these new opportunities that are coming out of the advancements in smart thermostats and what that means for opportunities for the energy provider?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I agree with everything Carrie said as far as going beyond the HVAC system and how it can be more of a total home tool than simply a temperature control tool. That's probably because Carrie comes to us and tells us what the technology can do. So we appreciate that. From my perspective, getting into the business of running these programs, our limitations on spending and innovation, are really based on the value of that saved energy or that shifted energy. And I think what we need to do from the utility perspective is really explore and forecast the future value of having the ability to control or change the behavior and usage pattern of home equipment. And so to spend more money, we've got to create more value. And so where is value going to be created in the future? And I talked about some of those things earlier, whether that's renewable ramping or managing, increasing the reliability of a more dynamic system with more distributed energy resources, being able to load balance and do those kinds of things. Today, those things aren't worth a whole lot. But we predict as the grid continues to change and decarbonize that that pricing will become more volatile, to supply the energy. How do we show that today so that we can make those investments in smart thermostats and smart technology to be ready for that ultimate economic condition on our grid? That's where we're spending a lot of time in talking with our stakeholders and talking with our regulators to do that. From an adoption standpoint, meeting customers where they're at, in my experience, you don't see anything that's universally at 45%. I like to joke that one message works for maybe 2 to 5%, and then you got to shift messages for the next 2 to 5%, and do some of those things. But getting more, getting messaging that's more meeting folks where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have a second poll here, so I wanted to bring those results up, and we asked, kind of related to the future of where this market is going. What new smart thermostat features will drive the next wave of adoption from among our executives in this space that are watching? With a few options that we gave them: sensors for room level control, so zoning and really taking a look at kind of the comfort in certain parts of the house. Indoor air quality sensing, right, Carrie, to your point. Syncing with users' tariff rate plans, right, to show savings in real dollars as opposed to metrics that maybe they're not able to associate with quite as strongly. HVAC maintenance alerts and being able to proactively predict issues with your home equipment. Optimizing use during times where clean energy sources are most available, which is something I think very, very few people have insight into today. Intelligent operation when not connected to the internet, so that edge compute use case that Abigail was talking about. And then finally, security monitoring with sensors and the thermostat as the hub, right, which is the new ecobee model. So lots of options here. The number one thing that came back as far as new smart thermostat features that could drive the next wave of adoption was syncing with the user's tariff plan to show savings in real dollars. And after that, indoor air quality. Carrie, that kind of does go back to your point about indoor air quality being really something that people are concerned about. We saw that in our own research coming out of the pandemic, because COVID-19, of course, is a respiratory illness. And so people are thinking about the quality of their air for the first time differently inside. But anything that you'd like to add on and into what you're seeing in the indoor air quality space?
Yeah, I mean, there's different kinds of indoor air quality, right? There's VOCs, there's particulate matter. I think what's also interesting in relation to air quality monitoring, same but different, well, it's different, but is folks' air filters. I mean, again, we went through, again, all these fires, and it's like, I personally still haven't updated my air filters. And so, having alerts that can maybe tie those two together for your air filters as well as what's happening in your home is also an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all really concerned about health and air quality across the country these days.
Okay. We have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to go to Boris and then Sean to wrap up to give us an idea of what strategies you think are going to be most successful in engaging users, right, to get kind of over this hump and plateauing of thermostat adoption that you've seen, and really getting them to connect it and engage with utility programs, right, like demand response programs, to encourage actually the use of smart thermostats going forward.
Yeah, right now there's over 85% that do not have a smart thermostat, right? The adoption rate is quite low in the market as a whole. So definitely removing all barriers to that adoption is key, and having someone in the home that can connect it, educate the client, show them how it works. There's also the technology piece there that might be a barrier, just the app simplifying the use of these smart thermostats as much as possible without removing actual capacities to the program, but having these thermostats as easy as possible for the masses and sent to homes is really key.
Great. And then I saw Abigail wanted to also chime in as well. So Sean, and then we'll end with Abigail actually. So Sean, last words from you and really driving, use and more engagement with smart thermostats going forward.
Absolutely. And just to build on Boris's comments, agree with what he said, but we're exploring different tiers and different sophistication, of thermostats. Are there easier ones, easier to understand, easier to install, and then really demystifying the transparency and control for signing up for a demand response program. So we've got a lot of ideas on that. So thank you very much.
Awesome. And Abigail, to you for final words.
Thanks. So historically, I'm sure Carrie would have something to say about this also. Historically, the main time to change a thermostat had been every 10 years when you change your heating and cooling equipment. And when smart thermostats first came on the market, many people who were not changing their heating and cooling systems did change their thermostat. I'm one of those people. And in the sense of being past those early adopters, it may be moving into a space more like lighting, that you have to replace a product that is there or catch it at a time it's being replaced anyway. And I think for that, the ease of use of utility programs makes a big difference. So for instance, with lighting, rather than do an incentive, a rebate that somebody needs to mail in or something like that, incentivizing in a way that lowers the price consumers see using midstream incentives turned out to be key to moving efficient lighting to mass market adoption. And I wonder if something similar might be needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Carrie. I saw you come off of mute there.
Oh, you saw that. I also think, just getting more folks to get interested in smart thermostats is a lot of like the utility messaging, for example, is like get a free or discounted smart thermostat. And we don't really lean into like the benefits that a customer can receive and how it might impact their life. And so I think it's really important for folks to like step into the consumer's shoes and really speak to those features and benefits to them, not just the price.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's time for us. So I want to thank you all so much for your time and your insights and participation today. Thank you so much for being here. I'd also love to let everybody know that our annual study, giving the consumer a voice here about how they think about energy in their home, how they're engaging with smart energy products, their familiarity with the types of programs that energy providers are running and their engagement and their perspectives on those, has published. It's called Smart Energy at Home, Renewable, Responsive, and Resilient. So this is pulling out of a survey we conducted in December. And so fresh, hot data right off the presses. So please let us know if you're interested in seeing those results. And then later in the year, we're going deeper on EVs specifically, as well as solar and storage. So please let us know if you're interested in any of our upcoming research. Our next Smart Energy Summit session is Thursday, June 30th, where we're really focusing on whole home energy management solutions and driving energy savings. So please come back and visit us in June, and like to call out many of our keynotes that'll be actually at Connections. So Connections, of course, is our flagship event that is going to be in person again this year for the first time after a few years now, here in May, and very excited to hear from these keynotes from Alarm.com, Sonova, Cox Communities, and NICE at Connections. Reach out to our team if you're interested in sponsoring Smart Energy Summit, if you're interested in our research or interested in speaking. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
On average, U.S. broadband households with smart home devices own more than 7 devices and spend thousands of dollars a year on home services. Parks Associates Consumer Insights dashboards share adoption, consumer demand, and market changes across the year for 5 leading markets serving the connected home to identify critical shifts in these markets and in consumer sentiment by tracking the core metrics that matter. This consumer research draws from surveys of more than 10,000 U.S. households, including trending data, sometimes reaching back more than a decade. Parks Associates offers consumer insights dashboards for 5 markets: home services, consumer electronics, video services, residential security, and smart home. To share a little more, we recently released the Smart Home Dashboard, revealing that 1/4 of U.S. broadband households bought at least one smart home device in the past 12 months. And households with at least one smart home device now own, on average, more than 7 devices. This dashboard covers the extensive product categories active in the smart home, including smart thermostats, smart appliances, network cameras, video doorbells, smart smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, smart door locks, smart garage door openers, and smart lighting products, among others. We also recently announced the release of the Home Services Dashboard, tracking broadband, mobile, and other consumer services. This dashboard shows that as of Q1 2021, the percentage of U.S. broadband households with standalone broadband service increased from 33% in Q1 2018 to 41% in Q1 2021, following the declining popularity of pay-TV bundles. These consumers pay $64 per month on average for standalone broadband service, up from just $39 per broadband household in 2011, a 64% growth rate. The fastest growing segment of home service bundles is a double play combining home internet and mobile service. Consumers are placing a greater emphasis on high quality broadband and mobile services, which is building value in bundling these services. Both the residential broadband and mobile industries experienced substantial growth during 2020 and into the first half of 2021, with demand particularly strong for high-speed internet and fiber connections. And 19% of U.S. broadband households currently bundle mobile and home internet services, paying an average of $128 per month. Going forward, 24% of U.S. broadband households reported plans to upgrade their home broadband, which would drive broadband service ARPU upwards 5% year over year. Adoption of residential security services has also continued to increase following the COVID-19 pandemic, creating additional bundling opportunities among connectivity and peace of mind services heading into the second half of 2021. Our dashboards provide companies with ongoing and actionable data on the adoption, purchase intentions, and trends for key markets serving the connected consumer at home. We are excited to bring this valuable trending data and insights to the market. To subscribe or request more information, please contact our sales team at sales@parksassociates.com.